Tonight, the Obamas take center stage at the Democratic National Convention. What we're learning about the former president's speech, nearly 2 decades after he first accepted the party's nomination.
There's so much enthusiasm about the future of the Democratic Party.
Our interview with a top Harris campaign advisor.
It's going to be a real special night ahead.
Plus, both candidates are out in battleground states tonight, hoping to build momentum. A special edition of the CBS Evening News live from Chicago starts now. Democrats hope tonight will reignite a movement as former President Barack Obama addresses this arena not far from where he delivered his own historic victory speech nearly 16 years ago. Good evening, I'm Norah O'Donnell, and thank you for being with us on day 2 of the Democratic National Convention. The former president will give the keynote address tonight in hopes of recapturing the magic of his own campaign for another historic nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris. Former First Lady Michelle Obama will also take the stage. When endorsing the vice president, Mrs. Obama will say that Harris has the vision, character, and strength that's needed at this critical time. And in an unusual move, Kamala Harris and running mate Governor Tim Walz will not be here tonight. They'll actually be at a rally nearby in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Former President Donald Trump is also here in the Midwest, visiting the battleground state of Michigan in hopes of making a dent in the Democrats' so-called blue wall. CBS's Ed O'Keefe is following it all and is here to start us off tonight. Good evening, Ed.
Good evening, Nora. As the convention is just getting underway, Democrats are preparing to formally name Vice President Harris as their nominee. And they're feeling increasingly optimistic about their chances this November, which is why they're excited to hear tonight from another leader who once gave them hope. Tonight, the Democratic Party faithful will put Kamala Harris over the top as every state delegation declares their support for the nominee.
This November, we will come together and declare with one voice, as one people, we are moving forward.
Harris plans to accept the nomination not here in Chicago, but 90 minutes north in the largest city in a critical battleground state, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. CBS's Weijia Zhang is there.
The stage is set here at Pfizer Forum Arena, where Vice President Harris will rally with thousands of supporters tonight, many of whom have been waiting in line since this morning. And it is the same place where former President Trump accepted the Republican nomination last month.
Harris aides are confident she will pack the room. Trump may be tempted to compare tonight's crowd size to the one at his own convention speech. Harris will contrast the two campaigns' approaches and appeal to voters in Wisconsin, where Biden won in 2020 by just over 20,000 votes.
In another Midwestern battleground state, Michigan, Trump continued trying to draw attention away from Democrats.
She's a Marxist communist person, and we're not ready for a communist president, okay? We're not ready for it.
Back here in Chicago, 2 famous Windy City residents, Barack and Michelle Obama, are set to headline the night. The former president hoping to inject some of the energy from his 2008 run into Harris's Quick Start campaign.
It's time for us to change America.
One of his campaign volunteers that year was Harris herself, then the San Francisco district attorney. Obama's speech tonight may mirror the one 8 years ago. He tried to help elect another woman to the White House and warned against the dangers of Trump.
America is already great. Our strength, our greatness, does not depend on Donald Trump.
Senior Harris campaign advisor Adrian Elrod spoke with Nora on the convention floor during rehearsals this afternoon.
What will former President Obama say about Vice President Kamala Harris?
They've been friends for a long time, going back to her days as Attorney General of California. They have a very deep relationship. She actually spoke at one of his conventions. So, you know, the bond and the friendship between the two of them is huge. And of course, look, you can't deny the fact that the 2008 campaign, that was a real election about hope and change. That was the theme of that election. There are a lot of similarities to, I think, the way people are feeling in 2008, how they're feeling now.
What can the Obamas do in terms of crystallizing the message about this election and the importance of it?
Well, look, they're the 2 most popular surrogates in the Democratic Party, or 2 of the most popular surrogates, I should say, are President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama. That's just the bottom line. They have an ability to connect with the American people, and that's something that President Obama does better than just about anybody else in our party.
One other thing we'll be watching for tonight, what does President Obama say about his one-time running mate, now President Biden? Given that Obama was among the top party leaders who at least didn't stop the conversations about having Biden step aside. Nora?
Ed O'Keefe with us here at the convention. Ed, thank you so much. Let's bring in CBS's Nancy Cordes and Robert Costa. And Nancy, let me start with you on that idea. Can the Harris campaign actually replicate the hope and change of Obama's 2008 campaign?
Well, Nora, they can certainly try, but they're not going to have a lot of time. I mean, after all, Obama had 18 months to barnstorm the country, to hold rallies, to spread that message of hope and change. Kamala Harris has only been the nominee for less than a month now, and she's only got a few months to go. But they can cast her as the heir to his legacy, and a lot of that is going to depend on former President Obama himself. How does he describe Kamala Harris tonight, someone he has known for 20 years? Does he talk about her in personal ways, specific ways that allow the American public to get to know her better? And how much does he hit the campaign trail on her behalf? He tends to campaign pretty sparingly these days. Is that going to change now that Harris is at the top of the ticket, Nora?
A key question. Nancy Cordes, thank you very much. I want to bring in Robert Costa. And Robert, tonight, we're also going to hear from a number of Republicans and ex-Trump officials. What will they say? What's the idea behind that?
5 total Republicans will be here at the Democratic National Convention, including Stephanie Grisham tonight, who resigned in the wake of the January 6th Capitol attack. She was former President Donald Trump's press secretary in the White House. There's a belief inside the Harris campaign that they can make inroads with traditional Republicans by having some of these Republicans on stage and raising the issue of former President Trump's conduct. On the other hand, I just spoke with former President Trump by phone. He's in Michigan today. He says whatever they're doing here doesn't really matter to him. He's reaching out on the issue of crime in Michigan, talking about immigration, and, of course, trying to make real connections with labor union members in the states of like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
Donald Trump hitting the campaign hard as well. All right, Robert Costa, thank you very much. We should note that security is tight on this second night of the convention, and that's because last night a small group of pro-Palestinian protesters broke through a security fence outside of the United Center, pepper sprayed officers, and threw objects at them. 13 people were arrested, but we should note there were no serious injuries, nothing like 1968. Now to Israel, where military officials say they recovered the bodies of 6 hostages taken by Hamas in the October 7th attack. The discovery comes as Secretary of State Antony Blinken and negotiators from Egypt and Qatar work towards an agreement to stop the war and release dozens of hostages that are still believed to be alive. CBS's Rami Inocencio reports tonight from Tel Aviv.
As Blinken pushed for a ceasefire, Israel's military pounded Gaza, killing more than 50 people just since this morning, including about a dozen at a school turned shelter. Overnight in southern Khan Yunis, in a tunnel shaft more than 30 feet deep behind a false wall, soldiers recovered the bodies of 6 hostages abducted 10.5 months ago. 80-year-old Chaim Perry from Kibbutz Nir Oz was one of them.
How does it feel to have your father's remains home?
It's kind of relief.
Noam Perry is his daughter.
What were the words you might remember?
Noam, your father is back home. It felt weird to me because I know he will never be back. He will never be back.
Israel said that of the more than 100 hostages who remain in Gaza, 34 have been confirmed dead. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today stressed their return is a goal, but the priority is to preserve our security, and we stand by that.
What do you say to that?
The only priority is the hostages.
And Perry says she can't allow herself final closure.
Only if a deal will be made, and it should be made fast.
And Secretary Blinken is now flying back to the United States. Funerals for 3 of those hostages happen tomorrow. And while Israel and Hamas accuse each other of sabotaging ceasefire talks, they are still set for later this week in Cairo. Nora.
Rami Inocencio, thank you very much. We're learning more about the 6 people, including 2 Americans who are missing after a mega yacht sank in a powerful storm off the southern tip of Italy. The search, more than 160 feet underwater, is being made more difficult by the angle of the ship and numerous objects blocking the narrow passage to the cabins. CBS's Chris Livesay is in Rome with the latest developments.
The search is on for the missing and for answers as to how this 184-foot super yacht anchored off the coast of Sicily could capsize and sink within a minute. Surveillance footage captured its illuminated 246-foot mast right before it swallowed in a severe thunderstorm. Weather data show the moment the storm hit Sicily's coastline at 4 a.m. local time. This was the ship's last known position anchored off Porticello. It's thought to have gone down at around 5 a.m. Rushing to the rescue was Captain Karsten Borner of a ship anchored nearby.
And then we saw a red flare. Yeah. So my first mate and I went to the position.
They found 15 survivors on a life raft, including a 1-year-old girl, seen here being carried by her father. The body of Chef Ricaldo Thomas was recovered. 6 people remain unaccounted for, including software magnate Mike Lynch, once described as Britain's Bill Gates, acquitted earlier this year of fraud charges in America. His 18-year-old daughter Hannah is also among the missing, along with Lynch's American lawyer Chris Morvillo and his wife, and banker Jonathan Bloomer, chairman of Morgan Stanley International.
Now, it's unclear exactly how a state-of-the-art super yacht could sink in a storm like this, but climate experts say warmer sea temperatures 3 degrees higher in the Mediterranean are making deadly storms like this one more common. Nora?
Chris Livesay, thank you very much. And nearly 10 months after an Army reservist shot and killed 18 people at a bowling alley and bar in Lewiston, Maine, an independent commission says local law enforcement and the U.S. military missed multiple opportunities to potentially prevent the rampage. The commission's report says the Army Reserve failed to maintain proper psychiatric care for the gunman, and the deputies who conducted a welfare check on the shooter weeks before the shooting had sufficient cause to take him into protective custody. A lawyer for several victims says the gunman, who'd been diagnosed with mental illness, should have had his weapons taken away.
It's a simple formulation, which is a diagnosed psychosis plus possession of numerous assault weapons requires action.
The gunman was found dead by suicide 2 days after the rampage. 3 Army Reserve officers were previously disciplined following a separate investigation. There's a new study out today that links a popular weight loss drug to a higher rate of suicidal thoughts. But there are questions about the findings. CBS News Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. John LaPook is here to explain. Hi there, John.
Nora, there have been relatively few reported cases of patients having suicidal thoughts or actions while taking one of these drugs for weight loss. It's important to note here that obesity itself is associated with an increased risk of depression. The study out today searched a large World Health Organization database that tracks adverse drug reactions and found a possible link between suicidal thoughts and semaglutide, the active ingredient in Wegovy and Ozempic. But Nora, the study has limitations. It only looked at people who reported having a problem while on the drug. We don't know how many people were taking the drug without a problem. We also don't know what the dosage was and how long people were on it. So far, the FDA has found no link between these drugs and suicidal thoughts and actions, but it's continuing to investigate. Novo Nordisk, the maker of Ozempic and Wegovy, says it stands behind the safety of its drugs and it will continue to collaborate closely with the FDA. Today, the FDA stressed to CBS News that healthcare providers and patients should have a careful discussion of possible risks, especially in patients with a history of depression or self-harm, and that patients should be aware of the importance of reporting any change in how they're feeling. Nora?
A sober reminder, Dr. John LaPook, thank you very much. Eye on America is next. President Biden last night touted his bipartisan infrastructure law that provided $350 billion for much-needed repairs to bridges and highways. Meanwhile, the mayor of one U.S. city is making an unusual pledge to knock down a highway and slow down traffic. As CBS's Scott MacFarlane reports in tonight's Eye on America, some leaders are trying to repair something more important than pavement.
Bishop Bernard Alex's church calls itself a home of restored believers.
Don't judge me by my container.
It's just a few miles from his boyhood home in Syracuse, New York.
They were gone.
A neighborhood Alex believes is in desperate need of its own restoration.
It was where people planted a garden.
Pioneer Homes, one of the nation's oldest public housing communities, was built in Syracuse in the 1930s, but then sliced apart in the 1960s when the government erected Interstate 81 right through it.
Through what? You took away a thriving, vibrant community. You took away the hope and the space of a people.
The highway still casts a massive shadow, separating it from white and affluent neighborhoods, hospitals, and schools.
You think they were trying to drive people out?
I do.
But only for a few years longer, because the government is about to level about 1.5 miles of this highway, including this part.
A CBS News review of federal records found these communities, which sit in the shadows of major highways, suffer higher pollution rates. The people have higher asthma rates. There are lower property values and lower incomes.
Syracuse is one of more than 130 communities nationwide that shared $3 billion in federal awards in 2023 to reconnect neighborhoods segregated by highway planners in the 1900s. From Portland, Oregon to Philadelphia, cities are capping stretches of expressways with parks and green space planted over the roadway.
It is a scar that goes through the heart of our city.
Syracuse Mayor Ben Walsh says his project is among the most ambitious.
We're driving beneath the highway.
Yeah.
Seems like an eyesore.
To say the least.
Costing more than $2 billion, they're rerouting I-81 around the city of Syracuse, then demolishing the current stretch, replacing it with a pedestrian-friendly grid of surface streets with shops, stop signs, and potentially new life for Pioneer Homes.
We can't undo the wrongs of the past, but we can try to get it right this time around. We have an opportunity to knit back the fabric of our cities and to bring people together.
While in other traffic-choked cities nationwide, highway expansion goes on.
Is it unavoidable this highway has to expand?
Yeah, it's unavoidable.
Like in North Charleston, South Carolina, where I-526, which runs through many mostly black neighborhoods, is set to be widened.
Some of these houses were already here.
Mayor Reggie Burgess says dozens of homeowners will need to be relocated, but the state is offering affected residents housing assistance, employment help, and college grants.
Of course, we don't want to displace people, but when we have to actually improve the infrastructure, sometimes we have to make decisions that are not accepted, but I think that people understand it.
But he saved me.
Back in Syracuse, Bishop Alex hopes more people soon move back to the neighborhoods near Pioneer Homes to speed up a revitalization that comes with slower, lower roads. For Eye on America, I'm Scott MacFarlane in Syracuse, New York.
And we'll be right back from night 2 of the Democratic National Convention with much more ahead.
This portion of the CBS Evening News is brought to you by Freshpet. It's not dog food, it's food food.
Finally, tonight, the theme of Day 2 at the Democratic National Convention is a bold vision for America's future. Democrats want to outline that this year's election is not just a choice between two candidates. It's a choice between two very different visions of America. Tonight's speakers will highlight the idea that America's best days lie ahead, culminating with the keynote address from former President Barack Obama. Our special coverage of the Democratic National Convention continues next right here on CBS, and that's tonight's CBS Evening News. I'm Nora O'Donnell in Chicago. We'll see you in just a moment.